Okay, so next we'll mark out the holes for our input jack. This is obviously going to have to come back out again when we do the wiring. So for now, I really just want to drill some pilot holes. There's no real good way to align these, so I would normally just eyeball it. Let's put the guitar up on the side like so. The alignment looking good. Got the guitar, got the drill. Trying to match the angle of that slope so our screw's going straight. Quickly just going to chamfer those holes as well. Okay, so as mentioned, the next thing I'd like to install is this bridge and bridge pickup. Now there's a couple of things to keep in mind before we just put the bridge in place, and one is the earth wire from the control panel, which has to sit under the bridge. So if I bring the camera down, you can probably see just that small hole just on the side there, comes out at the top here. That's essentially your earth wire from the control panel. So the control panel is here, the earth wire runs and the pickup wires run that way. The earth wire from the ground connections on the control panel run this way, then up through this hole, this slanted hole here, and out the top, and the bare wires will then rest under the metal plate of the bridge. The way I'd normally go about it, look for the ground wire, which in this case will be the wire on the left lug of the volume pot. And you can tell the difference between your volume and your tone pots. Your tone pot will have a capacitor, which is essentially a filter, and the volume won't. So from here I would thread the earth wire through that hole, which will be at the bottom of the cavity. Now I just sit the control panel upside down in the cavity for that for now, and just make sure there's enough of those wires exposed at the end of the ground wire. So normally be a black wire, but may not, so on the odd chance that it's not, just make sure it's either the wire coming from the back of the volume pot or the lug most left on the volume pot. I'm just going to push those wires up there like so. I'm really just going to leave that wire sit like that. And what I'd recommend as well is just to tape that off for now, just so it doesn't go back through. The next thing we'll need to do is thread our wires for our pickups. So again, these both will go through the hole in the side of the bridge pickup cavity. If you're unaware, most of the time the bridge wires will be red, the neck wires will be blue, but you may want to make a note of that, as you won't be able to see the wires coming from the pickups once the bridge is installed anyway. So I've already drilled my pilot holes here and just chamfered the outside of that hole. So next I'm going to place the bridge. Just want to pull on the wires coming from the pickup as well, and then just check they're not preventing the bridge from sitting flat on the guitar. Then take your 3 longer screws in your packaging, put those in place. Okay, so next we're going to have a look at our wiring. And people get a little intimidated at this stage, or those who haven't worked on guitars before. It's easy to understand why when you look at wiring diagrams and hear strange terms like capacitors and potentiometers, but in a general sense, the way electric guitars work, we've got a pickup which generates a signal. It does that, it creates an electromagnetic field. When we strum a magnetic string over the top of that field, it creates an alternating current. That current is sent through these active wires, the hot wires. And if I connected my input jack directly up, so if I connected my ground wire here to the ground lug and my hot wire to the hot lug, plug the lead in, we could play the guitar. The pickup selector, tone pot and volume pot essentially just manipulate that voltage. So the pickup selector allows us to choose which pickup, neck, bridge or middle. The volume pot is essentially a variable resistor, so it controls the amount of voltage that passes through it. So if we turn the volume down, we're sending some of that signal to ground. And the tone pot works much the same way, except that voltage is directed to the capacitor, which is essentially a filter that filters out high frequencies. None of these elements add anything. What they actually do is manipulate or take away or send more to ground of the voltage. So that's really all there is to it. So first thing we're going to do, as you can see, the green and white wire just up here, they're for the input jack, so I've just masked them off to the side for now. One other thing you might like to do, I've just taken a rag and cut a slot in it basically just to protect the finish of the guitar. I've got that sitting over the guitar like so, and that way if any hot solder drips down, it will hopefully not burn through that, and although it's unlikely to happen, it's just a good idea to take precautions. Okay, so when it comes to soldering, you're going to need a few things obviously. So we need a soldering iron, we're going to need solder. You should have more than enough solder in your packaging. I'd also suggest keeping a slightly damp rag nearby just to keep the tip of your soldering iron clean. And really, that's all you need. So when it comes to soldering, if you haven't done any soldering before, soldering is a little different to what people expect. It's not the same as gluing something together. It's really a transferal of heat. So we heat up our soldering iron and we tin our soldering iron, which means we've got a coating of solder on the tip of the iron. That prevents the soldering iron tip from oxidizing. Once they oxidize, they're very difficult to work with. Solder doesn't balls up and falls off the tip. So what we need is a nice coating, and even when you're not using your soldering iron, it's a good idea to tin the soldering iron tip even when it's not in use. I'd also try and run it at the lowest practical temperature you can. So just find the temperature that the solder's melting comfortably and don't increase the temperature any more than that. And we also want to tin our components. So in this case, I'm going to be tinning, which essentially just means applying a small amount of solder to these two lugs. So the second and third lug and the second and third from the right as well. So the way to do this, just want to get a little bit of heat on the actual lug first and just get a little bit of solder on there. And that'll just really help with the connections when they bond. So we need to tip our wires as well. So what I suggest is just loading up your iron with some solder and just dragging through. Really just want a little bit on the tip. And these are the pickup wires. So as we know, the blue wire in this case is our neck and the red is for our bridge. Okay, so if we look at our pickup selector, front position is going to be neck. Now just in case you're confused too, the pickup selector goes to the front on a TE style guitar. Volume is next, tone is at the back. So we've got our blue wire here for our neck pickup. So essentially what we need to do from here, and this is a little tricky, so we need to wire to both the second and third lug. We need to run the wire through the eyelet of the third lug and then across to the second lug. Once that's in place, just heat those lugs up a little again. And just test the connection, that's fine. So don't be tempted to blow or cool down your solder joints prematurely. You'll get what's called a cold joint, which is more susceptible to problems with the integrity of the connection. And next we'll do the same for the bridge pickup. So again, we're running through the second and third lug from the right. Hopefully you've got better eyesight than me, because I have a little trouble seeing these, to be honest. I usually use a magnifying light. It's a little hard to fit under the camera, unfortunately. Again, I'm just going to test the connection there. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is just solder these two ground wires coming from our pickups to, well, it wouldn't really matter, we could solder it to either of the pots, but I'm just going to solder both of these to the tone pot. So what I normally do here is try and get a puddle of solder on the back of the pot. Just heat it up enough first. Just going to kind of twist those together. Bend the earth wire to suit, which is handy. I might be running my soldering iron just a little bit too low temperature there, so there's a bit of a fine balance. If we run our soldering iron too low, we're going to be applying heat to the back of that pot for too long. So I'm just going to heat that up to about 400. Okay, and we're good. So I'm going to remove that rag. And just have a look at you. Okay, so we can see the green wire is coming from the back of the volume pot, so we know that will be our ground. So just keep that in mind. And your wire colors might be different, so just check. One wire should be coming from the back of the pot. You could do this in the opposite order. You could hook up the input jack first before committing to installing the control panel, just to test your electronics first to make sure they're working. I'm not too concerned about that, but it's an option. So just remember our green wire is our earth. Okay, so next we've got our input jack. So I'm just going to tin those lugs as well and re-tin the iron. Next I'm just going to tin these lugs. Just to explain input jacks. So we've got this arm here that secures the cable in place. It goes over the tip like so. Now our ground lug is the one that's actually connected to the inner sleeve. Our live lug is the one that's connected to the outside, and I'll explain how that works. So if you have your guitar cable, you can see we've got this rubber ring that separates the tip from the base. Pop the lead through, and so we can see our ground, the inner sleeve, is actually touching the base of the cable, and this arm is touching the tip, which is connected to the live lug. So if we connect those two wires up, we'll get a connection. Okay, so as I said, green wire is our ground, so I'm going to connect that up first. Don't need a lot of solder. Just check the connection, and lastly, our active.